Hello, good evening, and happy Friday. We are coming to you live with episode 11 of our weekly album discussion streams. I'm Matt, and tonight I'm joined by Cam.
Hey man, how's it going?
All good, all good. We've got some Brad here too. Not only, not only have we got Brad, we got mine, Obi. Thank you so much for the follow. Together, though, we are Ballpark Music, and every week we pick an album that came out on a Friday, give ourselves a week with it, and come back together on a stream for an in-depth discussion. No scoring, no taste making, because music is not sports. If you like what you see, give us a follow on the socials, and we will let you know when we're going live. Yeah. Did you have a good week, Cam?
It was a fairly uneventful week, to be fair. I mean, not a lot's happened, to be fair at all.
Does that
I
make it a
actually can't
good
report
week?
anything. I feel
Or...
bad for that. But yeah, it's really weird because I'm trying to remember anything that happened this week at all, and I couldn't tell you one thing. I've been watching a German TV show called Dark. That's pretty good. That's about it.
You did mention Dark the other day. You did mention Dark, and I don't think I ended up saying anything more about it at the time. So, what's your like one sentence synopsis?
German time travel, but the future affects the past, not the other way around.
Spooky, spooky, spooky. I mean,
It
speaking of,
is spooky, dude.
what's it on? Is it on?
It's on Netflix, yeah, it's on
Cool.
Netflix.
There you go.
I mean, you really got to pay attention because if you don't, you'll miss everything and you'll have to rewind. Like, it's not a show that you can just, have on in the background. You've really got to pay attention. But it's good. It's good.
Well, speaking of the future, Brad, are you looking forward to a nice long bank holiday weekend?
Yes, I am. I think everyone is really. It feels like it's been a long week to get here, but here we are.
No
So
doubt.
exciting times.
No doubt, no doubt. Is anybody able to figure out a joke involving the episode's number this week? But like without doing
Final
this.
Cut, man.
But without doing, gotta let me finish my sentences, man. Without doing the super obvious Spinal Tap one, because I have been
You
trying
did a
to.
Good Friday joke. You're not above doing a Spinal Tap joke.
I know. I'm not above it. I just thought, let's see if we can do something a little bit different here. But hey, you're ragging on me here. Is there anything you can come up with?
There's the Spinal Tap joke, and that's it. There are no other jokes involving the number 11. That's it. It's the only one.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, cool. So what are you guys drinking tonight? Cam, why don't we kick off with you?
I'm just drinking a Copperberg, man. I'm being boring this week. Sorry. Nothing else to say about it. Just some fruity cider from Sweden. Back to the old ways.
Nice. Yeah, so I have got gin and tonic with some frozen berries, essentially because I ran out of ice. So that was the next best thing.
That's
That's what I'm on.
You made porridge instead.
Porridge.
Your frozen berry. Yeah, put frozen berries in my porridge, man. I'm a drink.
I don't generally put gin in my porridge. So,
Well, there you go. I mean, so that is the first time I think that we have had a spirit on when we're talking about what we're drinking on stream. I can't think of another occasion when we've had spirits. So
you did a toast previously.
I did, yeah.
Ago?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess I didn't think about that because it wasn't part of the thing. And then I tried to read through a press release afterwards. So maybe I'll give you the press release duty this week. It's not as easy as you think.
No.
Yeah. Speaking of
It's a hard no.
first timers, I went down to local brewery. I think I've been threatening to do this for a few weeks and picked up a can of their Session IPA. It makes me feel like such a Shire Tory to say I went down to the local brewery and I picked up some of this, but it's really fucking good. They do it on draft. Like I have had draft beer Still haven't been to a pub yet, but like draft beer is something I think I've missed over the last year and a half. So looking forward to that. What's up? This is Water. Good to see you in chat. Cam is secretly drinking Cedrata. Does that ring any bells for you?
Told you about this, man. It's cedrata. It's Italian.
Lemon.
It's that
No?
lemon drink.
Yeah,
I keep telling you
lemon.
about. That citrusy drink. It's the best thing in the world, and I wish I was drinking it now, but I'm not. I'm drinking Copperberg. I wouldn't be secretly drinking that. I'd be talking about it for hours if I was drinking that. Not even drinking about it, and I'm going on.
So I tell you what, we are going to come in hot this week with our album that we are discussing this week, just appearing on screen for you now. And that's right, we've got Olivia Rodrigo's debut album, Sour, which was released last Friday. And we've spent the week with it. So as per the usual, let's take a look at the press release off the top. Olivia Rodrigo has unveiled her debut album, Sour. The 18-year-old singer and actress, who achieved chart success with her debut single Driver's License when it was released in January, has shared the artwork and track listing for the hotly anticipated LP, which was released on May 21st. It features her record-breaking hit and recent single Deja Vu. Alongside the album artwork, Olivia wrote on Instagram, quote, "My debut album Sour out May 21st. The record has been teased in the description for the music video Deja Vu. Olivia recently shared how while she wanted to write a song, let me try that one again. Olivia recently shared how she wanted to write a song about the feeling of having lived through the present situation before, Deja Vu, because she was fascinated by it. She said, "The concept of deja vu has always fascinated me, and I thought it would be cool to use it in a song around the complex feelings after a relationship ends. I started writing and recording Deja Vu last fall and had so much fun creating the different melodies and sonic textures you hear." End quote. The Ballpark star made chart history with the release of Driver's License, as it became the UK's longest running #1 debut single since Gnarls Barkley's 2006 hit Crazy, while also consistently topping the charts in the US and elsewhere. Olivia explained, quote, "I mean, that is just everything. All the recognition the song has got is beyond my wildest dreams. Taylor Swift, who is my songwriting idol, and I wouldn't be half of the woman and songwriter I am today without her, reached out and was so supportive of that song." So, I was doing some research ahead of this week's stream, and there's certainly a lot to dig into when it comes to this album. But it was Time Magazine's article about it that really caught my eye. And the headline was just, "Who is Olivia Rodrigo? How did she become pop's newest star?" Does anybody want to take a crack at answering that question?
Well, I think there's first, before we get into that, there's two big takeaways from the press release. One, how the hell did Gnarls Barkley release Crazy in 2006?
I know.
That seems what? That's far too long ago for that song to come out. I thought that was like 2012 or something. But the other one is maybe we would have got more plays on Spotify if we just promoted our album by going
Just real quick before we move on from Gnarls Barkley, so I saw that and immediately just went in my head like, what happened to CeeLo Green? Like, he was everywhere and then just suddenly nowhere. Like, all of a sudden, like he just seemed to stop existing around like 2014. And I think the answer is the odd second here and there of like reality shows and stuff like that, and also maybe some misdemeanor cases here and there too. But like, that dude was fucking everywhere and then fucking nowhere.
I'm sure he's still about in the industry. I haven't really followed his career or anything like that, but I'm sure I've seen him do a couple of things.
Yeah, not released music for a long time. But anyway, not a Gnarls Barkley stream. This is an Olivia Rodrigo one. Do you know the answer to who she is and how she is pop's biggest star?
Well, I think Same thing that happens to everything. The same thing that happens to sort of the likes of Billie Eilish and happened to Nirvana before. She wrote a great song that connected with people. I don't think it needs to be much deeper than that, really.
And that was Driver's License, right?
I think so. Yeah, that came
Okay.
out in January. The other two, obviously, Billie Eilish. She had Ocean Eyes way before she got really famous, but Bad Guy was the big one that blew her up. And you think about other genres. Nirvana had Smells Like Teen Spirit. It just takes one song to catapult you from relatively unknown to the biggest name in the music industry, isn't it? So,
And so, had you come across Olivia Rodrigo before?
before listening to the album, yeah, I'd heard Driver's License and I'd heard Deja Vu on the radio about a week ago for the first time, and actually, I'm not going to go into it now, but it really stood out to me for a variety of reasons. I think I just had Radio 1 on in the car, which in the UK is obviously our big radio station, the main player. So, yeah, it stood out on that station, and I think it's quite obvious why it stood out on that station when you listen to the track.
And Brad, how about you? Had you heard of Olivia Rodrigo before we had that conversation picking the album this week?
Definitely heard Driver's License when that was around and doing its thing. Also, I think Rick Beato did like a mini kind of review of it in one of his I've just listened to the top 10 kind of videos. So yeah, I've heard that, and I didn't hear Deja Vu though until this week.
And I think so I mentioned Bizarre in the press release as well, and it might be useful context for this discussion. But I mean, I didn't know this, but that was a Disney Channel show, and Olivia Rodrigo, as somebody who'd been in High School Musical, the series, I think is the right way to title that. I've not caught up with all of those, but there is obviously a long line of pop stars and artists and things like that who got their start on the Disney Channel. I guess for both of you guys, where does that kind of very wide alumni of musicians tend to land for you and your tastes?
This one feels a little bit different, I think. I mean, the big one, the obvious one's Miley Cyrus. Obviously, coming from Hannah Montana to become an international sensation. I love Miley Cyrus, make no bones about it. I think she writes great music. I think she's got an amazing voice. Seen her live a couple of times, and she's been awesome there as well. And I thought, think of the other ones as Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez, people like that. I feel like this one's a little bit different though, because I feel like they were bigger names before they went in. I don't feel like she has the Disney baggage kind of thing. Like, oh, she's only a famous musician now because she was Disney. I don't really feel like that's kind of part of her canon, or it certainly hasn't been spoken about in the same way. So I think it's a slightly different scenario, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe more people know her for Disney than I do.
Yeah, just to go back to Miley a second, we were talking briefly earlier before stream about Breakout. It's another one I think is going to kind of discuss you about when it came out. So I think it came out in like 2007 or 2008 or something like that.
2009, I knew that. I'm pretty sure it was 2009 or 10 because it was just before the last series of Hannah Montana.
Okay.
I'm sorry that I knew that. I'm so sorry.
That was the test. Yeah, I think it's interesting that you said about not having the Disney baggage, because I feel like some people have done a lot to very deliberately kind of move away from that in quite a drastic and dramatic way, whereas this doesn't quite feel like it's such a deliberate kind of shunning of everything that's come before. It doesn't feel like it's that kind of bold step away. It doesn't feel obviously like that anyway.
So I think prepping for this stream, it was interesting thinking about. Obviously, you have got those names that you've already mentioned there, Cam, and a lot of those being a little more recent artists. I mean, as you say, like Miley Cyrus's debut is one of those things that if you look back now, you're just like, oh God, we're getting old. This is happening way too quick. But there's another lot of names that spring to mind as well, right? So like Hilary Duff, Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears, these are all artists that got their start on Disney by some way or another. And I mean, I alluded to it back in episode 1, but like my formative years were soundtracked by boy bands. NSYNC were part of that. If memory serves me right, my mom actually banned me from listening to Justin Timberlake's solo album when it came out, and her concerns were probably justified when 10-year-old me settled down to watch the Super Bowl 38 halftime show and saw him expose Janet Jackson's boob on live television. But yeah, I mean, beyond that, in recent years, I've been largely dismissive of, the candy-coated pop that has come out of the debut of another graduate of the Mouse's House. You can blame it on the Jonas Brothers, you can blame it on mainstream High School Music, or you can blame it on me, but they've never really piqued my interest of late. Nevertheless, been expanding my horizons and musical tastes. So yeah, really excited to give a listen to an album that's had a lot of buzz around it, I think.
Yeah, sure. And I will say, like, obviously, ex-Disney stars don't always make music for people like us. Um, but they always are pretty much, you can guarantee, very talented people at the very least. Like, none
No
of them
doubt.
are
Yeah.
alumni of that kind of place, and at least don't have a great voice. You can say what else you want about them, but at least they'll all have that.
No doubt. No doubt. Anyway, should we get into the track by track? All these song names on this album are stylized in lowercase type, by the way. So imagine that we are whispering whenever we say them aloud, unlike the album title, which is black caps. So we're screaming that whenever we say it. And we kick off with Brutal. This probably starts exactly how I thought this album would sound straight off the bat, but that changes pretty rapidly, right, Brad?
Yeah, so you're in with these kind of soft strings, kind of, I guess, what you might expect to go into this. I didn't really know what to expect either. And then you get, I want it to be like nasty, and then you've got that like descending kind of chromatic riff coming in. Great drum sound, heavier than I expected for sure. And yeah, then you're kind of into like verse territory. Similar riff on the acoustic guitar, still keeping that like chromatic rundown kind of vibe going. Vocal delivery here is really cool. It's like a deadpan kind of. She is just talking, and she's very much sticking to the rhythm of the riff. It's very simple. Before it kind of builds heading to the chorus. Yeah, like this song interested me because it felt like the hook was mainly like based around that kind of riff rather than anything else, like rather than a big vocal hook or something, which I would definitely be expecting from an album like this, but it was like a riff based hook, which I was quite surprised with.
Yeah, well, I was slightly less surprised, but only because I'd read leading up to listening to this that she was a big fan of alt rock growing up and garage rock and stuff like that. And as soon as I heard that chromatic progression, really cool, by the way. It sounds really great. I really enjoy that kind of thing. It reminded me straight away of something like the White Stripes, which again you probably wouldn't expect from ex Disney person, but you kind of immediately that is gone from your mind, and it feels quite authentic as well, which is something that maybe doesn't always happen when you're trying to lose the Disney shackles kind of thing. And yeah, you sort of said about that cool spoken word progression is really great. Like kind of detailing her angst about being how old she is. Production is great, and the voice immediately is really, really good. That there's no getting away from that. It's a really great voice, and it's quite stripped back in quite a lot of ways, but it's really heavy in others. And it kind of delivers that great line at the end of the chorus. God, it's brutal out here. I'm not going to try and deliver it like she does because that'll never happen. But it's got all the space for that to really land. So there's some great songwriting in there as well. Great production choice to let that happen. Yeah, really, really interesting start to an album that I was kind of half expecting, but also wasn't expecting it to go that far.
Yeah. I will put down that my mind went to the Ramones on that chord progression, but I think you could probably slap any 3 power chords together at any point and just go, hey, that reminds me of the Ramones. Really excited when this track started. This new wave of pop artists kind of wading into guitar driven, almost pop punk-esque tracks is something that I'm very much enjoying at this moment in time. I'm going to leave kind of some of my more detailed thoughts on that for some other tracks where I think it's done better than here. And yeah, I mean, you've both mentioned the spoken delivery. It reminded me to an extent of Hobo Johnson. And I think musically this could have been on his last album too. We've spoken over the last few weeks particularly about intro tracks and how they're supposed to, help set the scene and, get some of those lyrical and musical themes embedded straight off the bat. But honestly, I think my favorite way to open up an album is to subvert expectations. Idol's, God, what was the opening track off Joy is an Act of Resistance? Colossus? Is that right?
Colossus?
Yeah, Colossus.
Yeah.
Perfect example of that. And, Joe did an interview where, he spoke about how they wanted to start off with a really, regimented tempo to begin with. And then after, 2 minutes, just go completely fucking nuts. Just because they wanted to say, okay, this is what you're expecting. But then us as the band, us as the artist, we're going to grab you around the neck and we're going to go, no, we're the ones who are going to be saying what's going on here. And Brutal does just that. You're coming in with an idea of what an ex-Disney teenage star's sound should be. You have that for a bar and it's just like, nope, it's not going to be that at all. So, it's not a bad track. Didn't blow me away, but I think it does a really, really good job in this opener spot.
Yeah, it's not the best song I've ever heard. It's not the worst song I've ever heard, but it is just that. It is a really great intro to an album, and it's quite going to throw you from what's going to come next. Till it kind of gets to that outro where it slows down a bit and kind of shows you what this album is more about in a lot of places, that kind of piano-led, softer approach on a lot of tracks. But yeah.
Yeah, the string part kind of echoes enough of the main riff to kind of fit with the track. But it is a nice intro and outro. Yeah, just some of the sounds. I think this does set you up quite well for some of the sounds that you're going to hear on the heavier tracks, like those dirty drums come through a few times, kind of really aggressively clip saturated kind of sound, and the vocals as well works really well with her delivery when she is delivering those more angsty lines. You've got nicely saturated vocals. It just works really well together.
Yeah, and I think Cam, you mentioned it as well. It does set up the lyrical themes. It's not the deepest track lyrically that we've had over the last few weeks by any stretch of the imagination, but it's all things that are going to be presented to you throughout the rest of the album. Young, Insecure, and pretty clearly laid out in the opener. But right, let's move on to Traitor then. And as you alluded to, just as quickly as my expectations were shattered by the last song, a choir and an organ rebuild them as beautiful stained glass windows. Have you got a beat on what this album is going to be yet, Cam?
Yeah, Yeah, I think so. I think this is pretty normal. There's a lot of artists doing things like you think about the Phoebe Bridgers album. There's a lot of songs on there like Chinese Satellite, which is really soft, and then you end with I Know the End, and it's this huge cacophony of sound and this kind of almost punk ending to an album. So I think that kind of thing's a bit more common than maybe it would be expected. So I kind of felt like because of the intro to the last song, because of the outro to the last song, would maybe filter into this because I know she'd been influenced by Taylor Swift and a lot of this song in particular and songs that will come later could have been on Folklore. Um, you've got that kind of really pleasant choral opening, like transitioning into it's almost like chamber pop, I'd say. So definitely fits for me, just her pad and her voice kind of thing. The thing I really like about this actually is it's a lot of modern pop's a little bit too perfect sometimes, and there's still a touch of grit to the voice, not in terms of like if she's saturated or anything like that, but you can hear some K's and some C's sometimes, and it's not all completely filtered out and completely got rid of, which is really nice. She's not reinventing the wheel here in terms of harmony and melody, but it's really nice and well put together.
It's a really interesting point that, I mean, it was something that I was planning on mentioning on this track. And then, I think that was going to be the last of it. But, you do pick up kind of some of those quirks throughout, I think, the album where, it's almost like the odd word here and there isn't actually being finished off. So like now it sure as hell doesn't look like it is one of the first examples that you get. It never becomes an it. It simply kind of remains like an eh. And I could never tell if it was a quirk of her accent and like, hey, I'm the last person to judge about, accent quirks coming through in your singing voice. But yeah, it was something that I definitely caught on, I think, throughout the album.
Yeah, there are a few like quirky accent bits that come through, and like you say, Cam, it is not. It never gets to a point where it feels sterile. If you see what I mean, like it feels like it's been kind of sterilized and all the character has been stripped out of it, which is really nice to hear for something I guess you kind of expect those kind of Disney connotations of everything's going to be like deliberately perfect. There are a few points in this where it's really nice to hear some like organic kind of stuff. Um, Other than that, this to me kind of just felt like a fairly straightforward-ish ballad. You've got the kind of 3/4 or like 6/8 kind of feel, so it kind of lilts along nicely. Um, Definitely more of a vocal-driven song than the last one. Whereas I said like that hook was kind of driven by the riff. This is more like kind of your kind of stereotypical like bedroom ballad kind of vibe. Again, some nice sounds coming through. I really like the way it kind of builds, like the emotional intensity of it, and like the arrangement as well. It really like fills out nicely as it goes through. Um, for a song called Traitor as well, like I maybe it's because I've listened to too much metal in the past, but you expect it to be a bit more aggressive from the start, and it starts really kind of softly, but it builds like quite nicely into that like angst that she's obviously putting across with it.
Yeah, so we spoke about lyrics on the last track. You really do on Trader hit on the most common theme of the album here, and it's that all-consuming teenage romance. And yeah, you gotta buckle up at this point because there's a lot more coming. Remember, I brought her up and you told me I was paranoid, you betrayed me, and I know you'll never feel sorry for the way I hurt. Yeah. And like I don't want to be too dismissive of I guess some of the lyrical content too, because as much as you look at it as a teenage romance, the subject of the song is talking about straight up gaslighting, right? All I did was speak normally. Somehow I struck a nerve. You got me fucked up in the head, boy. Never doubted myself. There's a bit of coercive control in there too. I'd leave you, but the roller coaster is all I've ever had. It's very, very serious stuff for all of the beauty of the musical surrounding.
That's one thing I've written down here is it in some ways it feels quite mature. Like I don't want, like I said to you before the stream, I don't want to harp on about her age because I don't want to be condescending. You know, you can be 18 and write great albums still, but you know, you kind of hear the lyrics on surface value and you think, oh, okay, lovesick 18-year-old kind of, you know, we've all been there kind of thing. It's very typical. But then you kind of listen again, and there's some really mature lines in there. There's some really smart writing in there too. Especially later in the album, I want to talk about that more because there's a song in particular that's got some really really smart writing on it, some really great lines in it. But it's a bit deeper, like you were saying, than kind of it hits on the surface, which is really interesting. Um, and yeah, and it's juxtaposed to that kind of choral song, that very sort of pretty ballad thing that's going on in the background. You got, you know, acoustic guitars and layered sounds and stuff like that. Drums that sound a bit like they've been played out in the hall, kind of thing. So it's yeah, it's a really interesting kind of duality going on there.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
sorry, Brad, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the duality theme kind of comes through again later in this album in some really interesting ways. I think you're right. There is like that tendency to, especially knowing the background of the artist, like listen to it just on the surface level and then not kind of dig any deeper and go, okay, this is a teenage, like a love song, kind of lovesick thing, and might deserve a bit more attention than that. I think a friend of mine said to me, "This sounds very much like it was written for TikTok," and while that is true, and I have heard it on TikTok a few times, um, I think there is also some deeper stuff going on as well.
I hadn't considered that aspect of it. I am a non-tic-tac. See, there you go. That just shows how much of an old man I am about this stuff. The old tic-tac. Don't you get those from the store? They come in orange and mint. Yeah, I don't use that, but you're right. There is so much music that is written for it. I'll continue to try and make a serious point for as long as you guys need. Don't worry about it.
I think I'm good. I've just had many people in my life being angry old men yelling about the Tic Tacs, not understanding the TikTok, so it's all good. just old man yells at cloud,
Yeah.
kind of vibes.
Back in my day, we just used to
Anyway, yeah,
chew
it's a
on.
smart song. Yeah, we should bring back MySpace. Remember this
Yeah.
30 seconds and you're done, man. You had a whole page. You listened to the music. You had your top 8 friends.
And you wanted to be edgy, so you put Tom in there, yeah. Um, just to get us back on track for a second, I mean, it is a wonderful vocal performance, I think, on this song. There's spots that I prefer over others, for sure. But you can't argue that she's got a great voice. Very much enjoyed the power in the bridge. The lyrics, aren't maybe at their most complex there, but the emotion that her performance packs in saves it from ever feeling contrived, I think.
100%. I think you can kind of sense we talked last week about St. Vincent, how it was unusual to have other people doing your backing vocals these days. It was quite clear to me that Olivia Rodrigo's doing her own backing vocals on this, and they're quite diverse in some places on this album, and in this song they are, and it shows you the range that she has, just being able to do that many kind of different types of vocal. There's more bassy ones, there's much higher ones than her usual register kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, you can't say it. This album always was going to be an introduction to her and an introduction to her voice. You know, she signed to Geffen, they know what they're doing. So a lot of this album felt like it was set up just to showcase that, and this song's no different.
Yeah, some really nice moments in the backing vocals here as well, especially on that bridge where you've already mentioned you've got like those kind of really mournful kind of R's that like she's kind of layering behind her, and it does really sound nice. And then obviously it like ends on the kind of minor four chord, like that if like the ending just doesn't feel like it resolves, it kind of leaves that like unresolved kind of tension, which is really nice going into the next song.
I'm so glad that I've got you here, Brad, because, I can hit the end of a song and just go like, this doesn't feel right. Why do I feel a little bit weird? And you can just go, oh, it's a, minor fourth. It doesn't resolve. That's why. So appreciate that very much. Thank you. Education every week. And as you say, we do move on to the next song, Driver's License. So I do want to just divert here for a quick second and go back to something that you said last week, Cam Dash said off the top of this stream too. And, when we were talking about this album, you said something to the effect of, if you've been in a car over the last few months with the radio on, you've probably heard this song. And, given the fact that it was mentioned in the press release that this has become the longest running #1 debut single in UK charts history, again, it's not another point that you can argue, but it's gotten me curious. How often has that happened for you in recent months, right? And is that something you do often, hopping in a car with like mainstream radio play?
Yeah, actually, every time I hop into a car, I always have Radio 1 playing because I know, because of what we want to do going forward, essentially, as people who want to work in this business, I always feel like Radio 1's a good spot if you don't have to listen to it for 8 hours in a row where they just repeat themselves constantly, to see what's out there now, what the style of music is. You'll hear all the great producers that are currently doing work on these albums out there at the moment, and you just get a real sense of what is happening at the moment, which is why not this song, but there's a song on this album really stood out to me because it sounded so different to everything else that's happening on the radio at the moment. This song doesn't particularly stand out to me in that same way. Oh, maybe it does. I mean, it's the huge single from the album, and it's quite ballady, which isn't very popular at the moment. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's basically why I listen to mainstream radio a lot. It's not necessarily that I enjoy it, but I feel like you can learn a lot just from sticking on Radio 1 and not just listening to the same songs that you'd hear on Radio 2, even though they might be better songs. That's not always, and you get a more active listen when you're in the car. You learn these songs, don't you?
Sometimes when I'm trying to write songs, I put Radio 1 on and think about what I like to hear on it, and et cetera, et cetera. Brad, how about you? Is sticking on Radio 1, or what are some of the other ones? I'm not very good on, outside of the BBC radio stations. Heart, Radio X,
Radio 2.
I said outside of the BBC.
I think there's Capital Radio and there's Radio X. I think are probably the two other bigger ones.
Outside of the BBC.
Just stick on Radio 1. The same.
I think we talked shit about the license fee a few weeks back.
Yeah. To be honest,
if it's not Radio 1 for me, it's Radio 4.
Yeah, Radio 4 is always a good one too. To be honest, my main reason for listening to Radio 1 in the car is that my car is slightly too old and too shit to have Bluetooth. So it's really not worth the 10 minutes fucking around setting Bluetooth up for the 15-minute drive to work. But yeah, I do get some enjoyment out of some tracks on Radio 1. And this one is a very car-oriented song as well. You get those you're kind of warmed up with the sound of an engine kind of starting up. You've got that pinging sound. I guess it's the sound of a door being left open. Like I said, my car is too old and too shit to have that feature. So
you left your lights on. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of sound, which morphs into that kind of unending piano pedal on the B flat, which seems to carry through 4 years. But yeah, this is a song I heard. I feel like this song has been out for a long time. January. I don't know if it has.
Yeah, January.
January last year.
No, 21.
No way. This has been out longer than that, I'm sure. I'm sure I heard this last year.
It does feel like it. But
that is basically 6 months ago as well.
Something else. Yeah. Well, weird.
Out.
Yeah.
Anyway,
you were talking about ballads a second ago, but I think over here certainly we've got quite a strong tradition of ballads now. Like if you think about some of the big artists, you've got like Lewis Capaldi is the big one. Before that, we had Adele. We've like been going pretty hard on the ballads over here for a while. But this is like a nice example of one, I think. Um, there are a few ballads later on where it's like, I think it'll be obvious at the time, but it doesn't really pique my interest in the same way. But this was nice. As like I said, you've got that like car pinging sound which leads into the B flat, which just like really grounds the song from the off. You've got some nice little bits of texture coming through. You've got like a really warm kind of bass wobble sound that kind of pokes through. Um, but yeah, it's kind of typical ballad fare, like chord progression wise. It goes between like an E flat major seven and a B flat major. Um, I think the standout part for this song for me is again that like hooky part. Um, I think the part that really piqued my interest when I first heard this, I can't believe it's only been out since January, but was that like, guess you didn't mean what you wrote in that song about me part, and you've got a really interesting shift in harmonic rhythm there, where the chords kind of change much faster than they have been in the rest of the song, and it's just a really nice chord progression, some really nice voice leading in there, just works like beautifully with that line. Um, Even like the strings on top, it's really nice counterpoint going on there between like the vocal melody and the chord progression. Um, and then you've got that like nice big swell with the synths before it just kind of drops back to that like really stripped back thing. I think like it's really, really, really well done. I guess this is the chorus we're talking about here. It's quite interesting throughout this album. There's a lot of points where I've gone, is this the chorus? Like it doesn't feel like you get like that big kind of climactic chorus, but you get these bits that are still really hooky and still really stick with you without necessarily being what you would traditionally describe as a chorus. There's no like necessarily anthemic parts, but some really strong hooks nonetheless.
Yeah, I actually kind of agree with what you're saying there because the verse to me in this felt super long, and I didn't know when the chorus came in, and it felt like it was just all tension and no release within that verse at any point. It was just constantly building up, and then it doesn't until you get that kind of that shift and it quickens up. You don't get any of that release come through. And it's really really satisfying when it does. I think that's a great. There's a couple of bits on this song where it's just great writing. That's one of them. There's the bit where the kind of claps come in with the drums, and you've got the piano mimicking the vocal melody. It's a really nice, simple but really effective bit of songwriting. Yeah, I think overall it's just good pop writing. It's like I said earlier, she's at no point reinventing the wheel harmonically, but there's some really solid bits of pop writing, and like we said, and like we're going to continue to say, this album is all about just setting up to show her off as the vocalist. She's the star in this song, and it's all about that.
Yeah, I think you say simple yet effective, and that sums up like so much of this album really perfectly well. Another great example is like verse two. It's pretty much like same fare as the first, but you've got the kick like comes in, like four to the floor kick, gives it some energy. This song would be in danger of becoming a bit of a drag if it just went back to kind of verse one territory, but literally just adding the kick is enough to kind of like make you want to keep listening to it. It's yeah, like you said, simple and very effective.
So I think both of you guys talked about your your engagement with radio and chart music and things like that. It's not something that I have got a particular frame of reference for. So I am coming in quite cold, and I think as you've both mentioned already, I didn't expect this song, having read what I had read about it, to sound how it does. It's not something that I would go straight away in my head just like, this is a chart topper. I don't think I would be able to name you three artists who are charting right now anyway, for what it's worth. But it didn't sound like that. I'm really pleasantly surprised this track is done this well. I really love the lyrics here. It's almost like the counterfactual or the counterpoint to what we were talking about on the last track. And I think it shows the complexity of the writing, but they are just so eminently relatable for just about anybody. You're tying in a huge developmental moment, getting your driver's license at 16, 17, with the all-encompassing feelings of teenage love that you experience around that same time. And effortlessly describing how quickly all of your motivations and your entire worldview can fall apart just as quickly as a high school romance. She does it so well here. Just looking through, I know we aren't perfect, but I've never felt this way for no one. I just can't imagine how you could be so okay now that I'm gone. Like, part of you very much wants to shake her and say, like, you'll grow out of this. This is an experience that everybody goes through. Like, it's all going to be okay. But she wants to wallow, and it results in something that I think is just so wonderfully frozen in time and really very well done. I come away maybe thinking, is it catchy? But I don't think this song needs to be that catchy. Pleasantly surprised by Driver's License.
I think she really actually addresses that in the first song, Brutal. Because there's that line where she's sort of saying, if someone tells me again to enjoy my time while I'm young, I'm going to scream. I can't remember the exact lyric. It's much better than what I've just said, but it's along those lines. So it's almost like I'm going to address that from the top, and then I'm going to go through all these emotions anyway, because just let me. And that's fine. That's cool. Everyone has to go through that, right? And yeah, well on Brad for absolutely correcting me, because I completely forgot that Lewis Capaldi, Adele, Coldplay, and all these artists exist, and they're all still chart toppers. I just kind of think at the moment, sort of drill and grime dominate the UK charts so much. You don't hear a lot else. So when I do hear something like this, it does stand out a bit. We're probably 2 years removed from the Lewis Capaldi album that was massive, and several from an Adele album. Definitely. So I think for the last year, and maybe it's just a recency bias thing, it did feel quite refreshing compared.
Only thing I know, I was going to say something completely pointless. The only thing I know about Lewis Capaldi was that he pissed a lot of people off at the Brits earlier this month by talking about Scotland in the Euros. So that maybe suggests to me, if he was there at the Brits presenting something, that he may have something out. But yeah.
I don't think so. If you don't know Lewis Capaldi for anything else, just follow him, because he's absolutely hilarious. Was involved in one of the best kind of music spats I've ever seen with Noel Gallagher, and it's absolutely incredible. Yeah, I'll send you the video afterwards. It's amazing. Came out to Glastonbury dressed like Noel Gallagher.
Yeah, I
so
saw
good.
that and I was cracking up. That was an amazing moment in time. It was like possibly the hottest Glastonbury ever, and he comes out in this like parka, just for the crack.
This is
yeah.
after Noel Gallagher slagged him off, man. So
Yeah, but like you say, Matt, it has like a kind of universal appeal. I'd probably even hazard a guess that it's probably even more universal in the States, where a car is kind of more tied into your identity and that kind of time in your life. Like over here, I think it's fairly normal to not get a car straight away at that kind of age, especially if you live in London, for example. Like, why would you bother? But in the States, where a car is kind of more of a necessity, I guess that probably broadens the appeal there as well.
This is a very, very good point, and something that I think probably slipped my mind, because I was lucky enough to get one myself just when I gotten to the age when I could grab my driver's license. But I mean, you're absolutely right. It is a rite of passage in the US, just simply because you haven't got the same level of transport infrastructure, and everything is usually so far away from everything else. I was going to bring it up actually about one of the lyrics in Brutal, where she mentions, like, I can't even parallel park. And I think a lot of people in the UK can't parallel park, but like in America, literally nobody can parallel park because, unless you live in New York or Chicago or something like that, you don't have to because there's so much space out there. You're just driving into a bay all the time. So, yeah, a few things that,
Who had... Sorry, carry on.
No, I was just gonna say, another example. I think of there's a few things that she's writing throughout this that you maybe pick up in a different way if you've grown up in the U.S. versus the U.K.
Who had Olivia Rodrigo's album makes us talk about transport infrastructure on their 2021 bingo card? I didn't.
She's getting into political activism. We talked about Gojira and their environmentalism and things like that, but Olivia Rodrigo wants to see greater links between our suburban areas and our cities.
Well, fair play to her. Is that all the proceeds for this song, I take it, are going to the transport department?
Yeah, it's TFL, yeah, everybody gets their freedom pass.
Definitely wasn't an electric car I heard on the intro to this song. So.
Absolutely not.
No, it was that pumped in noise you get on some electric cars, Brad. That fake kind of sound you get.
It reminds me of driving a
environmentally
car.
conscious, these millennials, man. Yeah.
So, although Driver's License maybe wasn't a track that stuck with me, I tell you what, the next track we get onto here, one step forward, three steps back, I'm going to lay my cards on the table right off the bat and say that this is by ways my favorite on the album, and possibly even one of my favorite tracks that we've covered on these streams. How did you feel about it, Brad?
This is another really, really well written track. Again, going back to that kind of not being sterile thing that we've mentioned before, it's definitely a great example of this. You've got that piano sound that's like in straight away, but it's an unfiltered piano sound. It's a raw piano sound. You've got lots of like pedal noise. I think at some point you even hear the like piano stall creak. It's that kind of vibe. It does feel real. It does feel grounded. The most interesting part for me about this song is that kind of ebb and flow and that duality. I mentioned it before, but you've got. There's some obviously really deep lyrical content going on, but it's kind of backed perfectly by what's going on musically, which is that kind of, it goes between what I would describe as like a loose kind of 6/8 feel, where you've got like da 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 da, and then in the chorus or the like one step forward, two step back bit, it goes to like a kind of straight 4 feel. You can hear Matt listening to it in his head right now. It's just done so well. It's such a perfect blend, and it so fits the lyrical content. This is a really, really well written song. And on top of that, it's like a great vocal melody as well. It's just so much like back and forth between those two parts, and I think Matt could probably explain better what's going on lyrically, but the way that gels with what's happening musically is just really, really interesting and really, really nice.
I haven't really got much more to add than that, Brad, to be completely honest. You pretty much covered off everything I thought about this track as well. The one other thing I'd written down is it's from a production standpoint, I love how close her voice is. It almost sounds like the microphone's in her mouth. It's kind of got that ASMR feel to it. It's super, super intimate, and I think that goes along with the piano creak that you hear and stall creak, and the pedal and all that kind of stuff. And those C's and K's that I'm talking about earlier, they're really prominent here, but they're never unpleasant. And you kind of think, oh no, I'm going to hear a lot of popping and hissing like we did on the Dinosaur Jr. record. That never comes across as immaculately done. I never heard pops done that well on a vocal take before. It's so smooth. It almost feels like it's not possible to get them that smooth and that sounding good. Just really good. It's just her and a piano, and it's a really well crafted pop song.
I remember listening to this, and I remember the first time I listened to this, I thought I am going to write about that, exactly what you've just spoken to, and it like just completely passed me at the time. But it's a really, really good use of what's called the proximity effect, and that is the sound of someone being really close to you. So the further away you get away from a sound source or from a person talking, like air the air that we kind of breathe and the air that is between us is a really good natural compressor. um so the further away you get away from a sound source, you kind of lose the bottom end of whatever the sound is and the really like top end, like the really high stuff. And it's a really nice effect to hear that super close vocal. It sounds like the microphone is probably this far away from her face, and it really does like kind of bring her into like to being right in front of you, because you can hear all of the low end in her voice, all of the top end in her voice as well. It's just a really classic example of using the proximity effect to kind of suit the mood of the song.
Yeah, it's also I think it's a quite difficult miking thing to achieve to get it that smooth. I don't know if you've tried it with more success, but every time I find it really hard to get those pops and clicks that controlled, because they're really prominent on the track. They're almost like a feature of the track and of the vocal and the melody and everything like that. You hear the all the time, and the C's that pop out, but they're really they don't even sound compressed. They just sound smooth, and I can't really explain. I don't have the technical knowledge to explain how that's happening, but yeah, I thought it was really impressive.
Imagine it takes a lot of good technique and a lot of good kind of mic control and a producer and a vocalist working very closely to get it to work in the way that it does here.
So, are either of you familiar with Taylor Swift's 2017 track New Year's Day?
You know I am.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about it, with in relation to this song, because everything that I have read has said that this one step forward, three steps back takes the piano line from that song and kind of interpolates it throughout this track. Taylor Swift and Jack Antonoff do get writing credits for this song, and I wonder sometimes maybe whether that's why I enjoy it so much, because I'm starting to develop Stockholm syndrome for Jack Antonoff, considering how much we're talking about music he's produced. But I just wanted to hit that off the bat here when it comes to that piano line, which like is one of the great things I think that is pulling me to and through this song. Brad, you described it so much better than I did, but that tone is just gorgeous.
I'd have to listen to them back to back, to be honest with you, to really tell you, because it's difficult for me to now. I didn't read that they got writing credits, but it's difficult for me to now picture them both side by side. I don't know. I mean, it's so difficult at the moment, and you basically have to give people writing credits for oh, they used an A minor in their song, so now I've got to give them writing credits because I've also used an A minor. I mean, you're talking about the Weezer album a few weeks ago, where they literally said that they just put someone on the writing credits just to, that there's no influence from them, but it was just to, you know.
I will say, I think it's not just
it could be either way.
So sorry. Yeah, I would say I don't think it's just a writing credits thing. In this instance, I think a lot of the writing around this track does mention that, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because the product that we have got sitting in front of us right now is just so fantastic. You've both spoken about the things that I love, and for me, it's all about that that flow, that rhythm that you were talking about, Brad, just taking you forward, taking you back. The way that the lyrics are syncing up over that just perfectly. It's almost like, me thinking, it's like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You're almost waltzing through this song, and like her emotive delivery puts away any chance of being able to describe the lyrics as hammy. I think it was the line, "Will you walk me to the door or send me home crying?" Just such a perfect example. The notes she's hitting, they're captivating, absolutely captivating. I think on the majority of this album, I could leave a lot of the tracks where she is softer in a delivery, but it's that intimacy that you were talking about, Cam, that I think really draws me to this song. We could go back to the Lana Del Rey discussion that we had back in week 2. We could go back to last week when we were talking about St. Vincent. I said on both of those streams, the tracks that I enjoyed the most were the ones when I was sitting there in the room on the piano next to them, right there by the microphone. And it's just perfect. It comes together and really helps deliver the emotional weight of her vulnerabilities, which are laid out so plain here. Yeah, you could distill this song down into a pill. I think you would cure anxiety worldwide. It is so calming. It's glorious. It's a track that I'm going to keep coming back to. And, I don't think you can underestimate either that it doesn't really outstay its welcome. There is probably a temptation, if you've got a sound like this, to just keep writing to that structure and just keep it going and keep it going. But, it's a relatively short song, and it probably then ends up kicking off what is one of the stronger stretches on the album for me. But love it. Love it.
I did just very quickly skim through the Taylor Swift song, and the piano line is similar, but it does I feel like writing credit is probably possibly slightly like over the top. It is kind of a sad picture of the music industry, I think, at the minute, that you just have to do these things out of fear of someone suing you. But she also did say that she was kind of massively inspired by Taylor Swift, so
Yeah.
I guess maybe that is just her way of being like, paying fair homage to it. But that song doesn't include that like really interesting rhythmic variation, which I spoke about before, and kind of where it's going with the lyrics as well, where she never knows what she's going to get, like from this person that she's singing about, the kind of duality in the personality there, and the two different time signatures crossing over. Yeah, I think I think the interesting
So
parts to this
interesting.
song. Yeah, I was just
Sorry,
gonna say, I
Brad,
think
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the interesting parts of this song are the parts that are not related to the New Year's Day. So, yeah.
For me, it's weird because obviously, big Taylor Swift fan. I've been saying I love Taylor Swift well before Folklore came out and all the other indie people got into it as well. Saw her on her 1989 tour, and this is possibly one of the least Taylor Swift feeling moments of this album. For me, there's other songs on this album where I could forgive them for having to put Taylor Swift down in the writing credits, but on this song, I didn't feel it at all. Not a Taylor Swift kind of. I mean, you could claim it's inspired, but it didn't sound like a Taylor Swift song in any way to me.
The piano line is very similar, and I guess it is kind of a cover your bases kind of thing, and kind of get out ahead of it and ask for the writing credit before you get
I think
penalized for it.
considering how much it's been mentioned in the coverage, I'm probably erring on the side of what you said there, Brad, about this being more of an homage, and paying tribute to Tay Sway. But yeah, I think I am pleased to hear that. I didn't listen to that song before coming to this stream because I wanted to talk it through a little bit, but I'm pleased that my new favorite song, I don't have to go off. It's not a cover or something like that. And I don't have to go off and find out that actually it was New Year's Day all along. I could have been having these experiences since 2017.
Definitely go back and listen to some more Taylor
Yeah,
Swift.
no doubt.
'Cause,
No doubt.
I mean, it is phenomenal. But
No doubt. And, Folklore, I think we mentioned before, that was a fantastic experience for me to go through and set me up, I think, right for some of the albums we've been discussing to date and today as well. I could talk about this for hours, but I think for the sake of everybody, we should move on to Deja Vu. As mentioned in the press release, this was another single released in advance of this album coming out, and was written all about Olivia's fascination with Deja Vu. What are you thinking here, Cam?
this is the song that I heard on the radio. Before I really knew who Olivia, I'd heard Driver's License, heard the name, but I didn't know this song was her. And I heard it and it stood out to me. I was like, this is very different for the stuff you hear on modern radio. I had the person sat next to me in the car Shazam it almost immediately because I was like, I need to know what that is. I need to listen to that a lot, and it's pretty much the sole reason why I said let's do this album this week or suggested this one, because it's a great song. It really is. It kind of has moments where I'm like, is that inspired by Beck? It's got that really weird, strange guitar kind of thing going on that wouldn't be out of place on one of his songs. It's got like this cool bells or tuned percussion. Brad will correct me on what it actually is in the intro. That kind of really cool thing that's going on there. It's got another great chord progression. It's got another great melody. It's got more great backing vocals. A lot of these songs on this album, she always starts off the same way, where it's just her and one instrument, and then it will build, and then another instrument will come in, and it's very layered in that way, and it's really really nice. And when the drums kick in later in this song, they're so good. They're so saturated and so distorted. Very stilted, but they fit the song perfectly. Again, you've got that more of that kind of strange affected guitar that's just really good. And that guitar sound is just not something I expect to hear on the radio in 2021, which is why it stood out to me so much.
Thank you for explaining what was going on with the drums there, because I had written down to ask both of you that, you guys are far more technically minded than I am. I thought it sounded like it's being played under a blanket is what I've written down here. But no, saturation, distortion, that'll get you under a blanket noise. Got it.
Yeah, it's a really cool sound. It's like not a massively unheard of sound like these days. I think it's used to great effect here. And you were talking about it being stilted as well, Cam. I think it's because there's like when it comes in, there's no hi-hats, so there's no kind of like you've not got something on every beat. You've not got like a consistent like high end kind of like metronomic kind of sound there. And I thought that was really nice. Just the way it kind of leaves space. You've got those big like hits, those big fills. You've got like the one and the three, like the kind of important parts covered, but it then leaves space for kind of everything else in the arrangement as well. The hats do come in later as it kind of builds, and again, it's like a really nice effect. That like synthy kind of guitar-y, like slightly distorted swirling part. It's got some really nice panning on it. Kind of makes it feel like it's kind of floating around in your head. The chimey thing, I would be probably inclined to say is some kind of synth, but it's a really nice part done, and the way that it's echoed then later on the guitar as well. It's kind of played again on the guitar, but with that, obviously, it's a totally different sound. It's really nice, really nice, really nicely written, really nicely arranged. Again, the atmospheric bits kind of work really well here. Yeah, it's another nice one. I can see why it would have piqued your interest.
I think as well, what you're saying there about the hi-hats isn't something I'd necessarily pick up on a listen, but it is really, I think, crucial as to why this song sounds different to me. I'm not a huge fan of overbearing hats, and you hear a lot of overbearing, as Rick Beato calls them, the second Rick Beato mentioned on the stream, those cicada hi-hats where it's like it just constant in your head, and I'm really not a fan of that. And to not have that on a mainstream song at the minute feels refreshing to me. Feels, I think, a big part of why they're standing out, as well as all the cool effects that were happening, great vocal writing, great, huge second chorus as well, and just really well built song on top of all these really cool things that you just don't hear as often anymore. Certainly not done in this way. This felt like an alt rock song from the 90s. It really did. Could have been, if you put Billy Corgan on vocals, it could have been a Smashing Pumpkins song, Drink. So it's I just think it's very different for the time.
I swear every week now I'm getting really confused and thinking like, what's the Smashing Pumpkins song called Drink? And then I remember what you're referencing, so yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I think the hats do come in. It's done very deliberately to like build to like what you described as the huge second chorus. So yeah, it's just really nice to have some space in there, definitely, in what is otherwise quite a full, like thick sounding arrangement. Just another like really simple but effective way to kind of build the song. It's not like throwing everything at it at once in that first chorus. I think that's kind of thematic of this album. Is like there is stuff that's left to the second chorus. It's not like a rush to the chorus. It's not necessarily all entirely about the chorus all the time. It's not like that first chorus has to like hit you and that's like the peak of the song. There's room even in like the choruses for it to build to the second chorus to be bigger, which makes the song progress better in a better way. Again, really clever writing.
Yeah, it's even on the intro, right? Like quite happy to stick around in that area for quite a while. My favorite part of that kind of extended first verse intro section is the line that references laughing at how small a jacket looks on someone that's accompanied by those like weird robotic laughing backing vocals like ha 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 ha. It's literally what would happen. I think if you asked an AI to laugh or just went, hey Siri, hey Google, laugh, it would go just like that.
Please do that again for the clip.
It's fine. We can get it in post. We can get it in post.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, one thing I actually did want to bring up as well about this is a lot of pop songs these days will be verse, pre-chorus, chorus, bridge, and that will pretty much be all the parts of the song, intro as well, obviously. The second verse on this is very deliberately different in the vocal rhythm and melody, and it's a really cool change up because it almost feels like a different part. It's not, it's the same part, it's another verse, but it's got such a different delivery. The Brad will be able to tell you about the rhythm if he wrote it down about it or remembers it, but it's got this really cool thing happening that gives it like it speeds the song up when it's coming out of that quite shouty chorus, and it just keeps that tempo up. It's a really cool thing. It's another kind of level of great writing to this song where you're not just kind of repeating the sections and just going in that standard template. You're thinking about each section and how it moves the song along in that way.
I think a lot of this album to me is kind of very based on that standard template, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, but it is done in a slightly different way, like you said. And the classic kind of songwriter's curse is verse 2. Everyone hates verse 2 because you get to verse 2 and you're like, fuck, what am I going to do here to make this sound different from verse 1? Because everyone's going to be falling asleep. Again, I think the vocal delivery here is something that I picked up on an earlier listen and meant to kind of come back to, but didn't. But from memory, I think she just leaves more space between the lines in the first verse. It's a similar kind of vocal rhythm, it's a similar kind of delivery, but in the second verse, I think there's less gap in between the phrases, and it's kind of very much more like kind of rattled off, which does add the pace to it. I think that's what I was planning to get about.
I will say I don't think I felt particularly strongly about this song. It usually slid off me, probably not too dissimilar to Strawberry Ice Cream in Malibu on the back of a spoon for two. But it's really interesting, I think, Cam, that you said about the lyrics in the song and I think it's interesting that you said about this being kind of a different or braver song. I think it says in terms of the musical hooks that you've got at play, it probably says more about me and my understanding of chart music. But I felt like when I listened to it, I wrote down, very finely tuned for a mainstream audience here, and that might just be that my idea of what music a mainstream audience would listen to is incorrect.
Well, yes and no. It is finely tuned for a mainstream audience. It is a very mainstream song, but every now and then a great song slips through to the mainstream of the charts. It does
No doubt,
happen.
no doubt. Yeah.
It happens every year that there'll be a great song that's number one. It's got great melody, it's got great songwriting, all these things. And just because most people don't want to pick up on those things, or they're not important to them, they just want to hear a good melody, something they can sing along to, or something with a good beat or whatever. It doesn't lessen any of those aspects, I don't think. I don't think. I don't know. It's a difficult one actually, because on one hand you are really right. It is a very mainstream song. It's got all the aspects you'd expect to hear, but there's just so many elements to me that I just don't expect to hear on the radio anymore. Like I don't expect to hear music that reminds me of Beck on the radio. I don't know if anyone else picked up on any of that or got any of those vibes at all, but especially with that kind of very kind of wacky guitar effect that's coming across. The life of me, I can't remember what it actually was, but yeah, that kind of thing that's going along all the time.
Just made me think of
It's just
BoJack.
not something I fully expect to hear. Yeah, well, I mean, like, I just in guitar music in general, I've been hearing for the last 3-4 years, guitar music is dead. And this is the whole mainstream major label album that has guitar on every track, and I'm hearing more and more guitar again now, but it's been a long time, sort of thing. You know what I mean? It hasn't been the prominent instrument for a while, and there's been a lot of talk about how it's dead, and it's now seems to be having a bit of a revival. So as a guitar player, that makes me happy. Obviously, it keeps us in a job. But I don't know. I don't know if it's just me that's been feeling like that.
No. And look, I just want to make sure I'm clear. The song didn't gel with me. It didn't gel with me because I felt like it was mainstream. I don't think that is a reductive term, because, as you say, there is a lot of really, really good mainstream music. Our album of the year last year, You and I, was one of the most mainstream albums because you can hear it everywhere. I fucking heard one of the songs in Tesco the other day walking down the aisles, and it's just like, hey, look, music I like. It's on in Tesco. This is great. So I don't say that to denigrate it. I think just a separate point there. But hey, if I wasn't too bothered by Deja Vu, let's move on to Good For You. Third single off this album, another inverted expectation point on this album. I'm going to kick off here by saying that I love this trend of mainstream music taking so many cues from mid-2000s pop punk and emo at the minute.
I want to ask you a question quickly before we go any further. Are you saying you liked this song?
Yeah, and I'm going to cover what I think you're going to say, because there is a very easy comparison that I think you can make, but I think I might go in a different direction with it because, hey, I'm revisionist on all of this stuff, and I'm never going to say, I really like you know who.
You know what I'm gonna bring up, so
I
I just
know,
wanted to
yeah.
make sure.
I know exactly what you're gonna bring up. I
We've
do.
all written down the exact same band and probably song, haven't we?
I'm really curious to know whether either of you guys wrote down the other one that I wrote down here as well. But I also wrote that band down. This trend of pop punk and emo, right? It's something that I think Travis Barker gets a lot of blame or plaudits for, depending on what camp you're in. Um, I'm not sure whether I've said this publicly to this point or not, and I realize that I'm probably, even amongst the three of us, shredding the minuscule amount of credibility that I had coming into this stream, the little bit that I had left after Van Weezer. But I'm going to confess this anyway. Like last year's Machine Gun Kelly album, Tickets to My Downfall, was genuinely, I think, one of my favorites of last year, and something that I ended up listening to a great deal. It could have been released by Fall Out Boy in 2004, and obviously, you know, it feels on the nose. That album feels like very obvious in a lot of places, but there is so much creativity at play. And seeing some of the biggest names in mainstream music make the music that they want is such a joy. I don't think that either of you guys would enjoy that album based on our conversations to this point. I would implore anyone who hasn't heard it to check their expectations at the door and just stick it on, see if you enjoy the ride. I think for you guys, maybe if we talk about like Willow Smith's Transparent Soul, which was recorded with the aforementioned Barker, and incidentally, Driver's License actually was covered by Travis Barker a few weeks ago with JXDN. Anyway, how that all relates to this song, I heard Good For You on one of those playlists last week. Hadn't connected that it was Olivia Rodrigo at the time. God, was I surprised when I reached this point in the album and that song came on. And yeah, really, really enjoyed this. You know, you get that in your face pop punk inspired pop.
And the reason that I asked you that question, Matt, is because I'm a huge fan of the band Paramore.
It's an obvious,
And that's who
obvious thing
Brad's
to
gonna
say.
mention.
Yeah.
This song sounds like. And I know very much, and for a matter of fact, that you do not like and enjoy the music of Paramore. And there's nothing that you can say about this song that will ever take away from the fact that it's straight out of the Hayley Williams playbook. It is a Hayley Williams melody. It sounds like Misery Business. It's a great song, don't get me wrong. I absolutely love Paramore and I love Misery Business. There have been many nights I've been at emo night at Coalition in Brighton, and Misery Business has come on, and I've embarrassed myself as a 24-year-old man singing all the words to that song. I was 24 then, obviously I'm not now. I'd still do it though. And the harmony and melody is just straight out of Misery Business. There's no escaping that fact. It might seem lazy to say that, and it might be the obvious thing to say, but it's inescapable. I don't think anybody could hear these two songs and not relate the two. I straight up loved this because I love Misery Business, and I don't think if you love Misery Business, you're ever going to dislike this song. There's so much angst and nostalgia that comes to me when I listen to this. You know, I'm coming. This song makes me feel like I'm coming home from school. I'm putting Kerrang on, and that video is there. That now controversial video from Paramore. Um, eh, it's right there in that time and place, and it's exactly what you were saying. There has been that revival of that kind of thing. I just want to say, actually, I love the bridges she writes. I don't think we've spoken that much. We've mentioned it a few times, but she writes really, really great bridges. You got that choral vocal straight into that stripped back vocal, build into that kind of muted chorus, and then it's that full chorus, and it's just absolutely phenomenal because it's kind of got that four places where it could naturally just go back into the big chorus, but it never does until that very last one. You've got like four places where it builds into that, and it's great songwriting. It just keeps you on your toes almost always, and that's what a great pop song should do, in my opinion.
Yeah, so like I said, Paramore comparison makes a lot of sense, and it's obvious, but I don't think it's lazy to say that. Um, I'll just throw out the other direction that I thought of on this track, not because I was trying to, I was getting my defense ready. I knew the prosecution would be on it today as soon as I talked about how I like this song, but. I think part of this is because I'm coming from a place where I'm listening to a lot of these revival type songs, as you termed it there. Um, I wonder whether a better comparison might be something along the lines of one of the more guitar-driven Florence and the Machine tracks, or maybe something else that's starting to skew a little more indie as well. The Florence and the Machine stuff comes to me because I think Olivia really lets loose on this song in a way that you don't see in a lot of other places on this album. Um, and like I say, I think in places compared to some of these other revival type songs, it does start to skew a little bit more indie. I think it's the obvious next step for the pop punk emo revolution that's bubbling away as everything is cyclic in life. And part of that might actually be down to the producer Dan Nigro, who he has a background in as an indie artist himself. You can tell that he is at home musically on this, and that's the case I think for the other guitar-driven songs on this album.
Yeah, there are these kind of indie like connotations, and like certainly tonally and sonically it does lean more towards the indie, but like Cameron said, we've all written about it, we've all mentioned it. This is very much a misery business kind of. It's misery business, and I'm here for it. Like that song brings back a lot of memories, and a lot of them good. It's very well done. It doesn't feel like a cheap knockoff or like a cheap cover or anything like that at any point. Again, probably more of an homage than anything. It's clear that like that Hayley Williams delivery and vibe has an influence here. And it's clear that it's like well respected. There are some nice like other elements that kind of come in as well that aren't from that song. You've got like some really nice bits of backing vocals that kind of, you've got like some really short R's that kind of stop and kind of like leave you kind of waiting. Um, like I said, it's like a more indie guitar tone. Like you've got that jangly kind of slightly distorted but clean sound, which I think is leading towards that indie vibe. Um, the only thing about this song I feel is like that, but just after the chorus just kind of feels like it drags a bit, and I know it is kind of bringing you back down to like verse tempo and verse land, but I always just felt like it should kind of keep building, and it always kind of fell a bit flat with me because I felt like it kind of should keep going there, but it just felt like it dragged it back a little bit.
Not maybe my favorite track on this album, nor is it maybe my favorite track from this, new with a U rock movement. Um, Axe is a great palate cleanser, I think, on this album. We've just had a couple of slower songs. We've had a couple of, much more intimate songs too. And then, as you say, a misery business esque song comes and gets you here. But it's a lot of fun, and that's a word that all three of us used, and thoroughly enjoyable there.
It's a testament to what a great artist Hayley Williams is. As much as obviously you'll disagree with that sentiment, that intro to the vocal that she does on the chorus is almost her trademark. It just sounds straight out of a Paramore song, and I think that's probably what gives all the Ms. Biz kind of you know what I mean, gives all the Ms. Biz vibe in it, because Yeah, I mean, it does, isn't it? Straight away, you think Hayley Williams, and you think of that song because of the way that that chorus opens. Um, I'll talk all day about Hayley Williams when she releases an album, but yeah, I think it's worth pointing out what a great artist she is. That you can hear something like that and immediately associate it with her as sort of a trademark or something you're familiar with hearing with her. And what you're saying about palette cleanser there is also, I think, a really great point. But I didn't really think about it in terms of a palette cleanser at this point. I thought about it in track listing terms, in terms of the next song, because the way it moves into that, I thought really, really clever placement in the album.
No doubt, no doubt, and I think we'll move on there in just a second. Like you can't argue that you hear anything other than Hayley Williams in a few places. You know, like I think especially it's that like baby, what the fuck is up with that like line that you got there. It's very much delivered in that way, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, okay, so let's move on to Enough for You. Cam, I've got you with me right now. I've got Brad back with me as well. Fantastic.
Hello.
So I can serve this question up to the both of you. Who wants to speak to one of the two things that we can explore about the titles of this and the previous two songs? Is it either the
I sorry, go on, Matt. You finish first.
is it either that we have had three titles ending in VU, you, and you in a row? Or is there any potential significance of going from a song which used the numeral 4 followed by a letter U in the title to a song which spells out FOR space YOU on Enough for You?
Yes, I thought this was very deliberate. Sorry for anyone watching. We've got a bit of lag on our end if we keep talking over each other. So I think Matt's done talking. He thinks I'm done talking. So we keep talking over each other. But no, I think it's very deliberate because the last one's very angsty. It's very kind of teenage driven. You know, it's straight out of that. So it's got the kind of for you, that edge, that angst kind of thing, that very skater boy type kind of vibe to it, you know, which is a song probably should have thought about when we were talking
Fuck.
about it, but it's only just come to mind because obviously it evokes yeah, evokes such strong images of Ms. Biz. But I think here we're back to sort of Taylor Swift inspired pop and a stripped back confessional piece. So it's a little bit more mature here. You know what I mean? That the lyrics are really great here. You've got someday I'll be something to what's the line? Someday I'll be everything to somebody else. You know, really great, smart writing like that. And it kind of feels like that was a deliberate. This is my angsty song. I'm gonna go with the 4 and the U. This one's my mature ballad. I'm gonna go for the 4 and the U in a different stylization. Maybe we're looking too much into it, but that's what it felt like to me. Yeah, I think with this song we're back to sort of Taylor Swift inspired pop, really. Acoustic guitar accompaniment. Um, I don't want to be condescending and mention her age a lot, but how the hell do you craft an album like this at the age of 18 is actually quite insane to even comprehend to me, really. It's got turns, it's got ups, it's got downs. It's just got great placing. This, after the last song, Good For You, is incredible choice, really. You know, you've got that big peak, that lull, and catch your breath, and you know, it's just all over the place, and it's absolutely great. Really, we've got like really solid melody on this again, and it's all about the voice, all about the voice. I started to realize actually she's kind of talking about the stages of grief with each song that you're going through on this album, which isn't something I picked up earlier, but as you sort of get to this song, we're in a different stage of grief. You know, we've been angry, now we're a bit more sad, and we'll go through other emotions later on.
That maturity is so clear on this song. The lyrics were the one thing that I wanted to talk about really on Enough for You, right? We've spoken a little bit about it already. You know, that I think there are places when this you know, focus on teenage romance and things like that can slide off my back a little bit. But more often than not, it's being done in a very clever way. And Enough for You was one of those tracks that makes me sit back and think every time. Um, like teenage boys are such fucking assholes, man. For real. Like between you found someone more exciting the next second you were gone, you left me there crying, wondering what I did wrong, and don't you think I loved you too much to be used and discarded? It's just fucking brutal, and a scene that I know is played out too many times in school when we were younger, and repeats itself in high schools to this very day. Like, just stop being dicks to girls and women, man. It's not that hard. Her brutal honesty sells this track for me. There's some really clever moments, like you said, Cam. The one that stood out for me was, I read all of your self-help books, so you'd think that I was smart. And then she follows that line up with stupid, emotional, obsessive little me. It's so standout. Those are all terms that you would never think about yourself being unless you sat down and read a really condescending self-help book. It parrots the themes that those books portray, but so well written lyrically.
It's such an immensely confident album for an album that talks so much about insecurity, like musically and lyrically, especially. Kind of musically, this one is more of like standard kind of ballady fare. I think you've pretty much covered off lyrically what I was going to say. Again, it's a really nice example of something not being sterile. At no point in this album does anything feel sterile or like it's exceptionally well produced, but it's not overproduced to the point where it kind of takes any life out of it, and it really fits with a song like this. Like, you need that kind of natural energy. She's obviously naturally got a great voice. She's obviously clearly very talented, and it's just another example of kind of letting that shine through, really. Yeah, like I said, it's not overly sterile. You've got even the guitar part, you've got like string noise, even someone like the sound of someone picking up the guitar kind of coming through. It's obviously very deliberate, but it sounds really great. Great choice in pads, great choice in the harmony here. You've got close harmony, which kind of feels more tense and it relaxes nicely in the chorus. Great melodies again. Amazing voice. Showing her range again. You go through like the lower bits, the falsettos. It's just, yeah, it's really nice. Okay, that's my final line on this. It's really nice. Okay, and it's a really nice song, and it's again a really well written, well produced song.
So yeah, I mean, your last line I think ended up being very similar to your first one, where you were talking about the production right at the very end there. I've said this before, production for me isn't something I struggle to pick out good production. But I can maybe pick out like bad production if I notice something, right? But I think it gets a lot of credit on this track when it comes to the vocals. Some of the sections where Olivia is really pushing benefit from the music fading into the background a little more to just help them cut right to the core. I think it's really well done there. Really well done. Great. We've had our very emotional, very angsty, like you were saying, Cam, or tracks. Let's move on to track 8. Brad, are you ready to feel a little bit happier?
I would be. I would be. This is. I don't think this is what this song really goes for. Again, it's another kind of ballady kind of vibe, isn't it? It's again that lilty rhythm that's kind of shown its head a few times. It's that like really simple piano part playing like those kind of arpeggiated things, deep piano sound again. Just on sound wise, before I go too much further, the piano kind of comes in and it's really like dark, solid, deep sound. As it kind of builds through this intro or like first verse section, it kind of starts to get more out of tune. It kind of ends up sounding slightly honky tonk. It's a really cool and interesting effect. Um, but it's a very typical ballady kind of feeling song. Some really nice parts in here shine through for me, like the build and then the drop to happier. It's obviously like the title of the track. It's an important point here. Some lovely bass and synth fills going through. Again, building the song as it goes through. Verse 2 is very similar to the first verse, but you add in the percussion there. Yeah, it's another like simple but effective. Just keeps coming up on this album, and it is kind of like these songs will all have like broad mainstream appeal, but are all eminently listenable, and they're never boring. As much as like it's not repetitive. Nothing ever gets repetitive. Things are done in a way that kind of doesn't allow that to happen. First chorus isn't always exactly the same as the second chorus. First verse is always different from the second verse in a really nice way. Like this one, percussion comes in. Again, great vocal delivery here. Some really nice string parts. Like you even get bits coming through. It kind of harkens back to some like really classic ballads. Those kind of ballads where you've got like these massive string parts kind of weaving in and out. Some use of that there. Yeah, another great ballad from this album, which we kind of come to expect now.
Did anybody else get Creeper vibes? Creeper, the UK band.
I'm going to mention Creeper.
Clarification.
Yeah. I'm going to mention Creeper
This-
later, but I didn't pick up on it here, I wouldn't say.
I think just that chord progression and that vibe gave me a real Creeper feeling. Obviously when Hannah's doing the vocals rather than Will. Which I wasn't expecting at all at this point. I don't think that could possibly be one of her influences, but that it very much gave me that feeling. The very classic sort of piano chord progression and arpeggio kind of thing going on in this song. Driving along with a masterfully done melody, in my opinion. It sounded very classic. It almost felt familiar, like it was almost like a piece of classical music or something that's like a standard, an old standard or something. I don't know if Brad can help me out on that one if you'll know what I'm talking about.
I think that some of those string parts coming through is like very reminiscent of some like kind of 70s, 60s, 70s, just classic ballads. They're kind of timeless. It's kind of very hard to put a specific it's from this generation, but that classic ballad sound, which has never really gone away, is kind of
Well, I wanted to touch on the strings actually because they're so lightly done towards the end of this song that if you're not really listening out for them, you'd almost miss them. But they add such a nice layer to the vocal melody and really drive the vocal along as well. I think it's just a really, really great example of not overdoing an element of your song, but having it perfectly sit within that mix to make it exactly what it needs to be. But my main thing about this song is the structure because it seems like one long verse into chorus and it just crescendos at the end. It just seems to keep rising and rising and rising until you get that end and it drops off and then you're in verse 2. And I just think that's really, really well done because it takes you along for that whole thing. It's like Brad said, great ballad.
Really interesting. I mean, you both said it there, another ballady track. I think this song suffered for me just by comparison to some of the other ballads that we've had on this album so far. I don't think it's a bad song. Again, I'm going to say that off the bat. I don't think that it is a bad ballad. I could see this being the cornerstone of probably, any other pop album, mainstream album that's coming out. If you didn't have a One Step Forward, if you didn't have an Enough for You on this album, you would I would come away from this feeling a lot stronger. But this track didn't capture my interest in quite the same way that the other ones did. Maybe thinking about why I like those songs and didn't enjoy this one so much. Some of that is maybe down to the lyrical content and delivery. Neither are necessarily low effort, but there isn't the emotion dripping from everything that I think we've had on a few of the other tracks. But yeah, we run to 35 minutes on this album as a whole. This is maybe as close as we get to filler or something that I think could be a B-side for me personally. But I think it's only held back in comparison to the other tracks that are on here, and the way that we've done some things.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think it's probably at this stage in the album one ballad too many. I think maybe it would have been better suited to have a faster, more upbeat song here in its place, because there are other ballads, of course, that come on the album. But this just felt like the wrong place to drop into another ballad. We just had a very ballady song. I feel like we could have done something different here, and it maybe would have been a bit more interesting. Doesn't take away from the fact that in isolation, it's a great song on its own merit. It's just album positioning, maybe showing a bit of naivety. Maybe a producer could have helped her out a bit more and said, maybe let's not place that one there. Let's do something different here. But or change this song in a way that stops it being that. Who knows? I mean, it's not my album, so I'm not going to tell her how to structure it. But that's what it felt like to me.
I'm gonna tell her right now. You should have put some pop punk here. More pop punk. I wanted more pop punk. No, like you say, in
Biz.
In isolation, good song. Didn't hit quite right for me. But that was just me personally. So let's move on to Jealousy. Cam, what are you thinking here?
This is such a good song. I love this so much. This song reminded me, and I think I've probably played this to you both at some point, but there's a Canadian German artist called Alice Merton, and she has a song called No Roots. And the bass line from this and the groove and everything like is so reminiscent of that song. It's so catchy. It's such an earworm of a song. You've got like some great locked in bass and drum thing going on, accompanying that really, really strong vocal performance. And it's just, really great song. Some really good synths going off in the chorus as well at points, and texture. You got piano comes in, it all gets a bit more chaotic. And there's just so many layers to this song compared to like other more stripped back songs on this album. I thought it was really good. And the melody is undeniably one of the catchiest things you'll hear all year.
Yeah, if you needed a cure from the ballad blues that we'd gone through in the last two songs, this is it. And it's all just to do with the groove. I think it's a great groove. It's a really nice groove. It's a simple bass line, simple chord progression, but again, just grooves done so well. The vocal phrasing as well enhances the groove. It never feels like there's kind of two separate things happening. It doesn't feel like a backing band is grooving and she's just singing over the top of it. Great vocal phrasing, great vocal melodies, really subtle kind of backing vocals here, which we've not necessarily had. They've been a bit more overt, but just really like kind of subtly enforcing important lines here. Really nice amounts of fuzz. You kind of get back to that saturated vocal feel in some places, which it's a great sound. She does it really well. Got some really cool like piano stuff going on here as well. You kind of get into some. She's talking about jealousy. You get into some like atonal piano stuff. It's like kind of sounds like someone's getting really fucking pissed off practicing the scales and starts hitting the piano, but it fits with the vibe of the song because she's talking about being jealous. So it doesn't ever detract from what she's saying, but it's just another kind of layer, another really clever bit of writing just to throw some kind of messy atonal bits in there, and it works really well again.
Yeah.
You're saying Olivia Rodrigo is bringing microtonality to the mainstream pad.
It's not a microtonality because it's a piano.
those
Yeah.
in those in between notes.
It's not microtonal, it's just atonal.
You summed it up perfectly, Brad. You know, yeah, like I think as much as a letdown as happier is, jealousy brings you right back into it. I love that back and forth between the very, very strong bass playing, which comes into its own here, and the real clunky piano, like you were talking about there. They work together so nicely to carry the rhythm of this track, and they kind of hand it back and forth in places. Like a real kind of surprise standout moment musically, I think, for me across the album as a whole. You know, Cam, you mentioned it. A lot of this album is about helping her stand out vocally, or you know, not helping her stand out. I don't think she needs any help to do that. It's such a wonderful voice, but you know, the musical standout moments are few and far between. Super hooky chorus comparison is going to be stuck in my head for the rest of the weekend because it's been stuck in my head all day. Lyrically, I mean, I want to just say, you know, I've given her a lot of credit tonight for standing out and, you know, communicating some very strong messages to a wider audience of people that need to hear them. I'm a little bit conflicted on jealousy. Like, she does it again. Let's start off with the good. The opening lines of this song are wonderful. I kind of want to throw my phone across the room because all I see are girls too good to be true with paper white teeth and perfect bodies. Wish I didn't care. I know their beauty. I know that beauty is not my lack, but it feels like that weight is on my back. There are so many people that will benefit from hearing this message from a megastar like her. Like straight up fuck Instagram. Her critique of social media and Insta models is cleverly done, suggesting jealousy started following me. The meaning of this song rang a bit more hollow when I saw a headline about the influencer boxes that were done for this album being sent to the Kardashians and the like. It's not a criticism that you can level at Olivia herself. It was a PR company that would have organized that. But like we mentioned with Gojira, I'm very much a believer in if you want to sort out an issue, you have to start at home and not just follow the pack on something like this. You know, Gojira were a fantastic example of actions speak louder than words here. It's a wonderful message. I don't think it detracts from that. It's just a little bit disappointing to be seeing that. And probably from outlets that are, you know, TMZ-esque or posting a lot of that stuff up. But you don't have to feed that machine. I took a different meaning
to this song. No, I took a completely different meaning to this song, to be honest with you, man. I kind of felt like it wasn't a fuck Instagram. By the way, go follow our Instagram because I post on it all the time.
No, fuck Instagram. but yeah, follow us.
It wasn't a kind of it wasn't a kind of that kind of thing. I think what this song is really saying and what I picked up on was that I see these things and it makes me feel bad about myself. But and I think that line is their beauty is not my lack. So it's more about just because they're really beautiful and it's fine and it's really great, that doesn't actually make me any less of a valid person sort of thing. And I think that's the takeaway message. It's not a kind of rallying cry against influencers or whoever. It's more of a that shouldn't make me feel worth less. That's fine, but that shouldn't, you know, it's a difficult thing to separate. So I think it was more about her kind of geeing herself up to say, it's okay that people are more beautiful than you or more talented than you. You know, kind of feels ridiculous for a person as good a vocalist to say that kind of thing. You know, people out there are more talented than me or whatever. But I felt it was that kind of message that was coming from this song.
You're right. Their beauty. Sorry, that was a typo over in my notes there. Yeah, I think, maybe it's the message that I wanted to hear because I'm very much fuck Instagram more generally. I think you can
From
probably
our Instagram.
yeah, apart from our Instagram, which is great, and I think doesn't share body shaming or body positivity imagery on it, as far as I'm aware. But there is a lot, I think, that is a very direct critique of social media and the influence that it has on young women throughout this track. Just looking down here, it's things like, I want to be you so bad I don't even know you. All I see is what I should be, happier, prettier, jealousy. And talking about I'm losing it. It's very much like kind of that spiral of getting into your phone and seeing all of this stuff and just seeing fucking filters and edited pictures out the wazoo. And like, she mentions makeup in a few songs here. It's not mentioned explicitly within this song about, trying to make yourself something for someone else. And you get a lot of that, I think, coming through in this track too. But
I don't know, because we've spoken about Misery Business on this stream, and there's a lot of controversy around that song, because of the line "Once a whore, you're nothing more. Sorry, that will never change." And I think there's a lot of I'm not going to speak for women everywhere here, so please don't mistake it for that. But I think there's a lot of kind of reevaluation of women's relationships to other women, in the sense of, I'm not going to call someone a whore anymore, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Or I'm not going to judge someone for wearing makeup, or I'm not going to judge someone for being more beautiful than me and slut shame them, or whatever you want to say about it. So I kind of took it to be along those lines, where she's saying, I feel this way because I see people and I don't feel as beautiful as them or whatever, but I'm not gonna kind of go down that path and denigrate them for it. I'm gonna take it into me. I don't like feeling that way, and it's jealousy, but it is what it is. And that's, I think, the key line in this song is, "Their beauty is not my lack." And I think that's kind of what that's hinting at there. So I don't know. That's the meaning I took from it. I'm not Olivia Rodrigo, so I'm not gonna put words into her mouth or anything like that. But for me, that was yeah, I know. Yeah, I could
Brad,
have fooled everyone, but
I
Yeah, are
can't
you
believe
not?
it's
Oh,
taken
yeah.
till now. I need to rename the fucking stream. This is Interview with Olivia Rodrigo about this album. I'm shocked. How could you?
Exactly,
so
man.
sorry.
Like,
But
you
yeah,
had us fooled for so long. I think it was kind of inevitable that we would have come to this point, and I've avoided it until now because I didn't want to sound like an old man talking down to younger generations. But I think we were very lucky in our generation to kind of avoid the brunt of what is social media, and considering like how much influence and how much kind of effect it's had on like the generation that's come immediately after us. um it is talked about in this album, like in a few points, right from the off. It's obvious that there are references to social media throughout, and it does play a huge part in young people's lives, like regardless of like gender or any of
Yeah.
that. Like it plays a massive part in the younger generations younger than us. Like their whole lives are massively influenced by social media, so it's not surprising to hear it talked about quite overtly. um I took it the way you did, I think, Matt, as a kind of fuck you to that. The line you've mentioned, Cameron, has possibly made me reevaluate slightly. Um, Again, what you were saying, Matt, earlier, like, does it ring a bit hollow? Uh, does it ring a bit hollow? I don't know. Could you feasibly these days release an album and kind of simultaneously piss off every social media vendor and outlet out there by telling them that they're trash? You know, is that going to be shooting yourself in the foot if you're trying to release a successful album? I feel like it possibly would be a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
How can you, as a emerging young, especially unfortunately, it is unfortunate that it is this way, but especially as a female artist, to come out and, you know, just like universally slam all social media, I think that would probably hurt you more than it would help you, unfortunately.
It's this. It's the Spotify argument, right? It's the I don't like this platform, but my music's on this platform, right? We don't have a choice in that because if you don't put music on Spotify, not that anybody listens to our music anyway, people won't listen to it if you're not on those platforms. Um, a- and so if it isn't the way I took it, and if it is the meaning that you took it, or both of you took it, I don't know. I much feel much more comfortable if three women were having this discussion than us. But if it wasn't that way, then I still don't think it's hollow because I just don't think you have a choice these days. You are forced into late stage capitalism, and good on Olivia Rodrigo for calling it out if that is the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, even lightly slamming it is probably a very bold move, considering it's going to have such an impact on your success.
No doubt, and I don't think it's not a criticism that I think you can lay at her door, because she wasn't the one sending these boxes out or anything like that, and I think that the way that you talk about this on somebody who is young and releasing their debut album is very different to somebody who is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 albums down the line. Actions speak louder than words at the end of the day, and you can top the charts and do all of that stuff, and whether you'd be able to do that sans a Spotify, and again, I really want to make sure this is properly framed. This is not a criticism of her. I think this is just a really interesting discussion point at this point. So, treat what I'm saying here more as a hypothetical. But, you can, if you don't go down that route, right? If you don't use an Instagram, if you don't use a Spotify, if you don't use that, you're not going to top the charts and things like that. But it's about what you're here to do in music, and if you're there to spread a message, then maybe you feel more comfortable doing something like that, knowing that you're not going to hit the charts. Fantastic, by the way. It was a very different era. I was listening to the aforementioned Radio 4 this morning. They had an interview from the gent from Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and he had a really good segment on the Today program, and it was all about how Relax was banned from the BBC airwaves, and yet still managed to top the charts. Other tracks ended up outselling it. Go and check that interview out. Really, really well worth it. And, again, not a song that was taking a stand. It was, a very different time, I think, musically, where, you could listen to something and the BBC would say, oh, no, this does not fit. I've gone off on some tangents here, but, I think it's actions versus words. Regardless of any of that, this song, I think, whether you take Cam's meaning, whether you take the meaning that I've taken out of it, fantastic message. It's great to hear somebody with her position communicating it, whatever's happening outside of it.
The one last thing I'll say on the social media thing, I mean, just caveat, I still think I'm right about the meaning. But anyway, if it is the social media thing, just look at what TikTok's done for the Wellerman guy. the sea shanty guy. I mean, he has a deal with UMG just from having one song on TikTok land huge.
Yeah.
There's no doubt to me that Driver's License became huge because of TikTok, and that's the if you're not on these platforms, you don't make it. You know, there's a really interesting article. I feel like we're just pumping articles at the moment about how one of Megan Thee Stallion's songs was not chosen to be a single. I think it's Savage wasn't chosen to be a single, but TikTok said, let's use this and promote this and make it viral on the platform. Savage was one of the hugest, biggest songs of last year. You know, you would have heard it if you'd put on the radio at any point or gone on TikTok, not the do very often. So be in no doubt of the stranglehold that these platforms, Spotify, TikTok, Instagram, etc., have over whether you become a nobody or whether you become a somebody. And I just don't think you've got a choice. There are certain actions you can make. It's easy for Gojira to support the Amazon who doesn't support the Amazon. You know, it's not a particularly controversial thing to support or go against. If you're a major label artist and you're trying to rally against these things, you can say what you want, but to actually not use these platforms when they basically have a monopoly over your life is virtually impossible.
I would
especially as an emerging artist. If you are maybe a bit more established, then maybe you can take a bit more of a stand, and you know that you have a following that will back you anyway. But as an emerging artist specifically, you know, like I don't honestly know how much these companies interfere in it, but I imagine if you're trying to reach multi millions of people and your song is saying fuck TikTok, then TikTok probably not going to look particularly kindly on it.
I would like to think this is going to be my last word on this. We've spent too long here. I would like to think that there are enough major label artists that would wish to stand with the families of young people who aren't here anymore, thanks to the body shaming, body positivity style hashtags that have been spoken about so much with an Instagram and a TikTok, things like that. Messages are very important. Messages are very, very important. This song is a very strong message. And I still think it aligns itself with that there. But anyway, we've spoken a lot about jealousy, rightly so. Let's move on to favorite crime. I wrote this down in my notes. This feels like a terrible way to roll out of what we were just talking about. It's the penultimate track on the album. Brad, I have to ask, what's your favorite crime?
Wow, how are we going to keep this safe for fucking
Regicide.
YouTube history?
Regicide.
What is my favorite crime? Jaywalking?
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah? Is that acceptable?
Perfect.
Okay, good. Let's move on. Cameron, what's your favorite crime?
What's the eating the rich? That's my favorite. Pure cannibalism, but only for billionaires.
I scribbled down regicide, so I think not too far off there.
Yeah, regicide's good too. Kill them all. We're gonna get taken.
See you later, ad revenue. We're off of Instagram. We're off of Twitch. Everything else. You know, Olivia's spanned a few genres across this album. When you look back at it, and this track, I think, actually even has a bit of a folky quality to it. That's something that mainstream pop hasn't been afraid to dip its toe into in recent memory, but it fits quite nicely here.
I got more of a country feel, to be honest with you. No, I got more of a country vibe than a folky thing, but I definitely see what you're saying. This song, actually, even just thinking about it right now, gives me goosebumps. This song is phenomenal. It's actually incredible. I mean, the backing vocals on the main vocal in the last chorus, I think might be some of the best backing vocals I've ever heard in my entire life. They are absolutely sensational. Um, and just in the first chorus as well, and then you amp that up, and I didn't think that was possible from that. It's you could almost just talk about the backing vocals alone. Um, Anybody watching, listen to this song for an absolute masterclass in how to do a backing vocal because it's just phenomenal. This song could almost pass you by, but when they hit, and my God, do they hit? It is, yeah, it invokes that feeling that special music makes you feel.
There's something very kind of, I think, ingrained in a lot of American vocalists, specifically that kind of country root in there. And it always used to be really great singers that have that kind of grounding. But if you look at Miley, like her voice, lends itself so well to that country kind of that country back catalogue. And Tasteway, obviously, like massive in country before pop. It's this the fingerstyle kind of guitar. It's super stripped back. It's mostly through this song guitar vocals and backing vocals. Um, Again, like you have to have the voice to pull this kind of song off, and it's not something that everyone can do. The great American artists that I've already mentioned, Miley, Taysway can pull it off, and to kind of sit in there with those as like a debut album and be like, you can play this alongside Miley Cyrus singing a similar song or Taylor Swift singing a similar song, and it wouldn't feel out of place, or it wouldn't feel like a debut album song, which is pretty astounding, really.
You guys have covered it off perfectly, I think. The Miley Cyrus and Taylor Swift sort of connotations and things. I haven't been great at being able, I think, to pick up a lot of influences throughout this album. I've spoken about how limited my my pop knowledge is, especially of late. But those were both things I was able to pull through here. Cam, backing vocals, and that piano laden chorus. It's just wonderful. Really, really nice stuff. A song with very little to criticize, I think. Very, very little to criticize here. And as many of them have been to this point. I wonder whether I'd feel stronger about it if it came earlier on. Again, just whether there's a few songs that are like this. I still think it's stand out enough because of those moments. But yeah, I've almost wondered about listening to this album back to front and seeing if that changes up how I feel about this song.
For me, this is the best song on the album. I know I think I might have said that about Deja Vu earlier. This is the actual best song on the album for me. And on the first listen, sorry, on the before the chorus hit, I was on the verge of writing another slow ballad. It's kind of boring, but I've said it before. When those backing vocals hit in, it's like a lifting effect on you. Like you feel like you're flying. It's incredible. Um, there's few vocalists in the world that can do that. Brad's named a couple there, um, but I'm not even sure they could write a backing vocal that good, a harmony that good, a melody that good for the chorus. I mean, they've written good ones between them, no doubt. Massive fan of both of them, but that really was something special. It felt like an instant classic to me. In the pantheon of great songs out there. We spoke a lot about the chant on the Gojira album, and this felt like that moment on this album for me. Didn't have the Fortitude intro into it, which didn't quite make it hit as hard on the early part of it, but yeah, those chorus vocals just. I mean, I want to end this stream now and just go listen to those chorus vocals. And Matt, I want you to go away and learn how to do that. And it's just all this sort of stuff because it's just absolutely sensational.
It's funny how you like it after mentioning the artists that we've both mentioned. Kind of strange there, but yeah, it's just another great example of kind of harkening back to a great American tradition. I think no one quite does it the same as like, that Nashville sound. It's just like always will be unique and kind of phenomenal. Yeah.
Tennessee, yeah. Look, with that, we come to our closer. Hope you're okay. Cam, why don't you help bring us home here? You felt very strongly about favorite crime. How you feeling about Hope You're Okay?
A nice ending with some really smart lyrical themes. I think that's the big takeaway here. It's got a lot of heart and a lot of emotion. Some lyrics that I could only dream of writing. Her parents cared more about the Bible than taking care of their own child. It's just phenomenal. That's a great line, and hits so deeply. Even though I've never even experienced anything close to that, felt that moment, which I've seen a lot on social media about people, screaming out the lyrics to Brutal and, I'm so sick of 17. That does not resonate with me in any way because why would it? I'm 10 years beyond that sort of thing. So I think it would be a bit weird. But these lines really do. Does she know how proud I am that she was created with the courage to unlearn all of their hatred? It's just. Again, I really don't want to do this because I think it's so condescending to mention her age in this. But how do you write lyrics like that at 18 with that emotional kind of weight to it? Phenomenal. The really good. This song is actually the biggest Taylor Swift inspired moment for me on the entire album. It sounds quite a lot like Blank Space, in the chorus, especially. It's kind of out of nowhere, if you go back and listen to that song, it's got a real Taylor Swift vibe. Soft outro, but it fits nicely with the emotional themes and the journey that she's tried to present through this album. And the piano outro with the kind of muffled talking, I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. Kind of actually made me think of Sweater Song by Weezer a little bit, just because it had talking and that kind of thing. But yeah,
Hey, Bob.
I could almost not remember much of the music from this. Yeah, I could almost not remember much of the music from this because this is the smartest lyrics on the album by a long way, and just, yeah,
I don't.
not much more you can say.
I really don't think that you sound condescending when you mention her age in relation to just how smart these lyrics are or anything like that. I had a conversation with my wife earlier, and she actually incidentally had her last day working at a school today. Congratulations, so proud of you. But we spoke about some of the lyrical themes throughout this album, right? And we spoke about the Instagram thing that I was talking about. We spoke about the gaslighting, and we spoke about this song as well. And my overwhelming feeling that I get from this, and from talking to her about the experiences she's had working with kids that aren't far off this age. And again, sorry, I mean, not to say that Olivia is a kid or anything like that, right? But that generation's going to be okay. To be able to talk so smartly and so sensitively, I think, and this is something that you tend to find, I think, with that generation. We look to our parents' generation and they talk about like, oh, you're these woke kids these days and things like that. This is filtered down past us. This is just like, this is how high school age kids talk these days. They understand that family is blood and nothing more than that. You know, you don't have to love your parents because of the way that they treat you. And to hear Olivia talking about that, right? You know, about regardless of that, regardless of what her middle school friend experienced, she loves her. She is so proud of um, her, and you know the fact that she was created with all of that love and strength. Absolutely phenomenal. What a wonderful, wonderful message. And like you said, Cam, I'm you know I'm lucky. I have a great relationship with my parents. Um, a lot of other people don't, but I still got that huge emotional payoff that, you know, I spoke about. We didn't get that with the closer this week. It really happens here. It's so well done. And this is where I go back to Creeper, right? You know, I think about our trips to Creeper shows, and I think about when they closed out with Misery, and I think about all of the teenagers on each other's shoulders screaming out every last breath on that song, and all of us feeling a little bit uncomfortable. But you know, I get the impression that Hope You're Okay will be an anthem to so many in that same way, right? And would expect a similar scene at her concerts.
Yeah, 100%. I think the best thing about this song lyrically is it's just all packaged in a sweet message to her friends about how she misses them,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, I miss my friend, but you know, I'm gonna say this about them, and this is just this absolutely incredible thing. I I couldn't even think this way when I was her age. Not not to say sorry, I wasn't thinking the opposite way, but I mean, these weren't issues or something that I would ever have even conceived of. And for her to be writing them on a major album, to be putting them in, it's so easy to be kind of ham-fisted with lyrical themes like this, to be on the nose and do it in an awkward, clumsy way. But they're are just, but the last two songs in this album just honestly blow my mind. They really do. They're it should not happen. It should not be written by someone of this age. Um, the fact that they're not singles, I kind of understand, but yeah, they're absolutely incredible.
I think this song does a lot for the album in a fair few ways. I think there's a lot of kind of sonically tying things up. You've got kind of sounds coming back that we've heard before. You've got those distant, kind of almost cinematic drums coming back through here. You've got some chimey kind of sounds we've heard on previous songs. Like I think I can't remember what you've referred to them on, but there was one track. You've got dirty piano, big percussion. It even goes back to Driver's License. You've got electric piano, kind of playing a pedal note that kind of jogs your memory back to that. Um, Lyrically, it does a lot of tying up as well. I've talked a couple of times about things that would possibly resonate more with the American audience. Um, and I think this is kind of another case of that in a way. Like you're talking about, you know, loving the Bible more than you love your child or whatever, and that's possibly more of an issue in America than it would be here. It's obviously still an issue here, but the thing is, it just kind of hammers home how much it resonates anyway with like us as well. You keep saying like the age gap and like, oh, how can she write this when she's so young? I mean, that's a very kind of over exaggerated example of what you said, but um, I think there are so many themes on this that would resonate with so many people. And I think overall the message is massively positive, massively good, massively good messages to be getting out. And this kind of just ties that up really beautifully.
Yeah, I think the other thing is it's not so much her age that surprises me. It's just I remember being 18, and obviously it's 10 years ago. It's not like a million years ago or whatever. I just could never have even conceived of doing something like this. I don't know about you two, or writing lyrics like this, or yada yada yada. I think that's the thing that blows me away the most is just okay, well, where's she gonna be in 10 years' time? Because if this is what she can do now, she's only gonna get better as a songwriter with more experience, as a lyric writer with more experience, as a musician with more experience. It's a really exciting introduction to Olivia Rodrigo. And something I'm only just realizing when you're kind of talking about it there, Brad, is that this really is a tying up of the themes of the album as well, because obviously she had a lot of hatred, and a lot of anger, and a lot of sadness, and a lot of emotion on this record. And kind of part of me now thinks that maybe she's talking about, I'm proud of you for learning to unlearn all that hatred. You know what I mean? But maybe that's kind of a reflection on what she's had to learn to do now. I've had to learn how to do that, and you're an inspiration for that or whatever. It's phenomenal. I could talk about it for hours. Really good. It's absolutely incredible.
You flagged it earlier. You said, as I'm talking about this stuff, I'm recognizing that this is the stages of grief, right? And that is the last one there. So I think that was a very astute observation. Look, you've said we could talk for hours about this as well. We have to this point. We're gonna move on to our sum up discussion here. I'm just gonna remind you guys that we have gone for longer than we have for any stream to this point, so if we could just try and keep it brief, that would be fantastic. But Brad, tell me, what did you think of Sour?
First listen, I thought there were too many ballads. The second listen, I kind of started to like the ballads more, and probably third and fourth listens, some of the ballady bits sort of standout moments, but it's just broken up with enough like groovy and kind of hard hitting pop punky kind of tracks. There are some great throwbacks to alt rock sounds in there. I think I even heard the exact guitar tone from Brain Stew at some point during this album. I'm pretty sure that guitar tone is on this record. It's amazing. It's a really well done album. I'm not going to mention anything to do with age because it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter here. It wouldn't matter if this was a like massively established artist who'd been doing it for years. This would still be a great album, no matter what.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sorry, man. You go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I completely agree with everything you said, and I think if Gojira hadn't released an album this year that I still listen to every week, and it's been 3 weeks out now, and we don't have a lot of time to listen to other music that isn't the music we're doing that week, it would be easily my album of the year. I don't think it goes into my rotation in terms of an album. I think there are songs that are going into my rotation for sure. Those last two in particular, the Paramore song, "Good for You." Sorry, I've forgotten what the name was. But I'm really excited to see what she does next. I'm really, 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 really excited to see what she does next because, like I said, I think she's only going to get better. I think a lot of this album isn't aimed at me, which is fine because why would it be? So it's kind of hard to get super super into it as a thing I want to listen to regularly. But I think she's gonna dominate in a way that Billie Eilish has dominated for the last few years, and is now releasing, some of the all-time great pop music. And I think it's going to be those two at the top for the foreseeable future, along with the likes of Taylor Swift.
Yeah. I mean, where to start? I think there's elements of all of that I want to hit on. I think you maybe think about this in a debut as a debut in a slightly different way than we thought about Slope's debut album, just purely by dint of the weight of the machinery that's behind it. But I none of that takes away, I think, from what a fantastic debut this is, for a lot of different reasons. And as you say, very excited to see where she goes with it next. You both mentioned it. A lot of the commentary that I have seen surrounding this album has been, if it's coming from people our age, it's been like, hey, what a cute, eerie reminder of, teenage years this is. And, Some of those things I spoke about earlier. I just want to go back and shake her and things like that. But I think if you take that approach, you seriously risk, being unintentionally quite reductive about a lot of the lyrical themes that she's hitting on here. It's some real serious subject matter. And it takes some balls, I think, for any artist to speak about some of this stuff. And she has done it phenomenally well. I don't think any of the other Disney alums that we spoke about off the top would have been able to, or, would have taken on this type of subject matter on their debut album at age 18. And, again, I appreciate there's some of those albums that I haven't listened to. There's going to be a lot of young women and men that are going to listen to this album, see themselves in these situations, and feel like it really resonates with them. That is important. There are moments that I recognize. Very few of them cut through to me personally. I think the biggest takeaway that I have from this album is that this is exactly why I would be terrified to be a parent these days, because my God, are teenage boys just fucking horrific in their treatment of teenage girls. This is going to be a lot of people's favorite album. It's not mine. There are enough tracks that don't hit for me in a way to say that I don't think this hits my rotation in the same way as you can. But yeah, there are some incredible songs on this record. I love One Step Forward, Three Back. It's unbelievable. And like I said, avid supporter of pop artists exploring pop punk influences. More of this. More of this. So,
yeah, I don't think you could have summed up any better, to be honest with you, and that's perfect.
Well, why don't we put Sour behind us then, and let's look ahead to next week. I did get a chance today to listen to the first handful of tracks on the new Blackberry Smoke album. Alas, I don't think we're planning on a heavier dose of country for next week, are we?
Well, small technicality, but I don't think we can do the new Black Midi album because it actually came out on Wednesday and not today. No, we're doing the Black Midi album. There's no questions there. I don't care that it came out on Wednesday. It's still a full album. It's still released in the previous week. And that band, on their previous release, Schlagenheim, were pretty much phenomenal. So I'm really excited for this one.
So no matter what, Cameron is doing the Black Midi album, even if me and you, Matt, do completely different albums.
It's right fucking there. I say it at the start every week. We listened to an album that came out the previous Friday. You could have gotten a head start on this and everything. I don't know. No, well up for
To be fair, I only just found out that it came out on Wednesday, and because I was looking it up, I was like, "Shit, is this Black Midi week?" I was looking up the date, and I was like, "Okay, it was released on Wednesday for some reason, but it was scheduled to be released today."
That band don't do a great deal of things by the numbers, so that does not surprise me, and I think that is why I would still be happy to do Black Midi, even if that Blackberry Smoke album is great. We'll bend the rules a little bit here for Black Midi next week, but that's next week. I think we're at about wrap up time here tonight. We sticking around for a little bit of something post stream here, guys.
Yeah, we're gonna raid.
Fantastic. So if you're with us live here on Twitch, stick around after we say goodbye for some post-stream fun. But if you have missed any of this discussion or want to hear it again, we will have a recorded version of this going up on our YouTube channel on Sunday. If you're watching that recorded version, we'll be going live again next Friday at 8 p.m. GMT with another album review. Shout out once again to Millie Draws-A-Lot with a Y on Instagram for all of our wonderful graphics. If you want more Olivia Rodrigo, then head over to her website or just about any website on the internet because everybody is talking about this album. and quite rightly so. If you want more Ballpark music, follow us on Twitch, subscribe to us, and hit the bell on YouTube, and check out our link tree. That's /BallparkMusicUK, where you can find all of our socials. Cam, long one, but did you enjoy it tonight?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was an incredible album. Really enjoyed talking about it.
Brad stayed with us throughout. You had a quick break, but you enjoyed it too.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we talked for longer about this than we did Gojira, but you know, here we are 2.5 hours later.
Done it.
It's been great.
Done it, and then some. I tell you what, I think I need my break as well, but I have had a lot of fun tonight. We will see you all next time. Stay safe.